It's June in Scotland, so of course it's grey and wet. And with my lack of waterproofness making it impossible to ride, I sent a cute thief out to find me something to build. And find me something he did! Last time it was a made in the UK short steel Leeson, but this time he's gone completely the other direction. Let's find out if it's right. I love it already. This is a rare find indeed. A prototype GT trials frame. I have to also say, no, this isn't my new sponsor announcement. GT are pretty much the opposite to a smaller UK-based brand. I have to admit, I've had this frame for about a year, but I didn't feel right making a video on it while I had a clashing mountain bike sponsor. Now that I'm in limbo waiting for my new bikes, it seemed like the perfect chance to get it built. However, in this day and age, how am I to tell this is actually a GT and not some random cheap frame? Well, if the stickers aren't enough, there's a machined logo here, another one here, here, and more here on the dropouts. This is the real deal, and GT want you to know it. This frame was made around 2012 or 14 and is very much meant to be a more modern style competition trials frame with no way to add a chair and dedicated Magura rim brake mounts with extra struts to stiffen the rear end. Trials riders love a stiff rear, and this design is almost the industry standard now. Also, just like me when I had enough of college, it's got some pretty decent dropouts too. And check out these curvy chainstays, it almost makes me blush. But because it's an older frame, it has some older standards, like a bit of casual racism, but mainly this straight 1 1/8 head tube. Now, like I mentioned, I have had this frame for a while, and despite it being completely new and never built, someone hasn't stored it very well, so it does have a couple of scratches. Damn that person, whoever it is. Weight-wise, it's not as light as most modern comp frames at just over 2 kilos, but it's not a tank either. Goldilocks would approve. But that's enough about the frame. Let's get it built and see how it rides. In a completely left field move, I'm foregoing the tradition of starting with the headset and moving straight down to the arse. The cute thief got me this bracket, which is fine, I guess, but it's cheap and it weighs a ton. I complained and demanded a better one. This frame deserves better. With CT being such a good boy, he did have a backup in case I became a Karen, and this Trialtech model is much more like it. It's one of the lightest wide-axled models you can get, and is still strong and reliable. He says the only reason why he didn't suggest this one in the first place was that its previous owner didn't use any grease and the threads went into the sea. So, what do I choose? A heavy model that's got threads, or a light one that doesn't? Bear in mind that this is an extremely rare frame that I can't replace. Well, I obviously went for the lighter damaged one. I'm not mad. I figured threads are merely a suggestion, and it will probably be mostly fine, maybe. And you know what? It was totally mostly fine, probably. I guess modern bikes don't have threaded brackets, so this has just been updated. Nice. And with that fitted, we're nearly done. I just need to fit some cranks, and continuing with the Trialtech theme, they were nice enough to send me a set of their SL models. These haven't changed much in the last 10 years, but they haven't needed to. Unlike most Trials cranks that are CNC'd seemingly without too much thought to strength, Trialtech custom forged theirs into a design which has had a lot of thought put into it, not only for strength, but also for being lightweight. Now, I said they haven't changed much, but they have had one decent upgrade. Rather than the older threaded standard, Trialtech now use a splined mount. This is the same as a Shimano, so you could fit a single-speed sprocket if you wanted. Or you could use Trialtech's own freewheel. If you're new to competition trials, it's standard practice to have the freewheel mounted to the cranks. I'll explain why eventually, but this is a decent freewheel with 18 tooths and 108 engagements. They should call it the polyamory freewheel. Trialtech also make a tiny bash guard to fit these cranks. This is also splined and is as minimal as it gets. I wouldn't want to hit this too hard, but in competitions you get penalised for hitting them, so people have got pretty good at avoiding it, just like me in college. I'm right foot forward, so we'll run it like this, but a weird lefty can mount it the other way up to suit their backwards ways. With the bash and freewheel fitted, a lock ring and bolts holds it in place. The advantage of a spline fitting is that it's a lot easier to remove if needed. With the older threaded style, they were on so tight it was impossible to get them off without a massive vise and long leverage pole. If you were thinking of using this freewheel for normal riding, then think again. The springs are so strong in this thing that the drag is insanely high. Trials bikes don't need to roll fast, but we do need reliable drivetrains, so unlike some folk, we don't mind a bit of drag. So, why have the freewheel on the cranks? Firstly, trials riders are weird, and we shun anything that's considered normal. I mean, come on, we don't even have seats. But there is a practical reason too. By moving the weight of a freewheel to the centre of the bike, it reduces the weight of the rear wheel. Now, trials is all about accuracy, and a lighter wheel is easier to move around in position than a heavier one. But some of the reasons are more traditional, and trials riders are a stubborn bunch who don't tend to want to try new things. Front freewheels are quite an old concept and were used because hubs and freewheels in general weren't very reliable. So it was easier to carry a spare crank or two with new freewheels fitted than it was to carry spare wheels. Also, cranks back then were mostly 5-bolt pattern, and the smallest bash guide you could get was limited by this. By using a threaded crank, you could use a smaller 18-tooth freewheel and bash, which would give you more ground clearance. These days, there's a lot more options for reliable hubs that don't weigh too much. But front freewheel is still lighter, and it's also a lot cheaper. So it's stuck around and is still the standard drivetrain type for trials. Right, enough about weird drivetrains, let's fit the rear wheel. No building from me today. The Cute Thief found me a complete one. If the frame and cranks haven't been enough proof that trials bikes are weird, then how about this wheel? Wheels are definitely a compromise for comp style trials. We want a nice wide rim for extra tyre support, but we also need it to be as light as possible. To accomplish this, trials rims have huge cutouts and are also single walled. They're stronger than you'd think, but rims are considered fairly disposable, so they're not quite as robust as a standard mountain bike rim. Moving on, the hub is a Trial H hub. This brand isn't around anymore, but they made some decent parts. Rear trials hubs aren't complicated though, just 135mm front hubs with some threads for a screw-on sprocket. And speaking of, the Cute Thief knows I love a bit of bling, so he made sure this one has a sweet titanium one fitted. This is 15 tooth to match with the 18 up front, and is pretty much the industry standard ratio for 26-inch comp trials bikes. I thought the wheel felt pretty light, so I decided to weigh it. Is 964 grams light for a rear wheel? I actually don't know. With that useless bit of info out the way, I'm going to add some weight back to it. The issue with a rim like this is that the inner tube might want to escape out of the massive holes, so I need a nice wide rim tape. Yes, I know this is just sellotape, but this is actually quite a good lightweight option. To match the frame, I'm actually going to combine this with some shiny aluminium tape, which will also help strengthen it. There we go. Once inflated, this should look pretty cool. Schwalbe will be providing the rear rubber with the Magic Mary model. Back in the day, downhill tyres were what everyone would run to avoid punctures, but I'm mainly interested in the ultra soft compound to try and get that ultra grip. The big issue with downhill tyres now is the weight. Puncture protection comes at a cost. But saying that, at 1,094 grams, this tyre isn't as heavy as I thought it would be, and it actually isn't far off what a trial specific tyre would be. At the risk of being too geeky about tyres, I'm going to mention rebound speed and stability. This tyre has thick sidewalls that gives the tyre a slow rebound. Now that's good and bad. Good because the tyre will feel predictable. You won't get bounced off a rock like you might with a lighter, springier tyre. The downside is that the damped feel can make springy moves like gaps and side ops harder, as the tyre won't be giving as much assistance. On the other hand, stability is increased by having such stiff sidewalls. This is extremely useful when riding off-camber awkward rocks, as the tyre won't squirm like a lighter one would. The damped feel and stability means the bike feels a lot more planted and predictable, at the cost of being heavier. Tread pattern wise, this tyre is obviously meant for going downhills quickly, which isn't necessarily going to be the best for trials. Fortunately, Schwalbe and Unia joined forces to create this knob snipper, so I'm going to modify the tread a little. Well, when I say a little, this is what an hour's work looks like. I know, it's quite dramatic, but there's method to the madness. By removing every second shoulder knob, I effectively turn the tyre from a fine tooth saw into a coarse one. This means the tyre has more space for the corners of objects to get in and be caught by the remaining knobs. You never lean a tyre over into corners in trials, so cornering traction isn't a concern. Also, by reducing the heights of the knobs, they flex less and make the tyre even more predictable. It also has the added benefit of making the tyre just a little bit lighter. This is still a little heavier than most trial-specific tyres, but not by much. Now, I'm not going to risk an easy fit instant installation. Remember when I said these rims were single-walled? Well, one really inconvenient thing with that is that the tyre can be a really baggy fit. And if you're not careful, cannot seat correctly, and the inner tube will soon look like a balloon animal. And yeah, comp trials still use tubes. I did say they don't like new technology, didn't I? Tapered steerers and through axles are still a relatively new adoption. I don't see tubeless coming anytime soon though. One issue is getting a reliable seal with rims that are mostly holes. But mainly the fact that rim brakes are still the best option, for 26-inch at least. And we need to grind them fairly often to give the brakes more bite. With a tubeless system, it's impossible to grind the rims when the tyre is inflated. And if we let the air out and get the tyre out of the way, we need to reseal it again and risk contaminating the braking surface. So, tubes might be old school and punctures are definitely a thing, but changing a tube occasionally is the lesser evil. But back to the task at hand, I keep checking the tyre is still seated as I go. The number of times I've fully inflated a tyre only to find a bead slowly coming off is higher than I can count. I'm bad at maths. Though the adrenaline of trying to deflate a tube before the bead fully lets go is quite the rush. That said, the opposite can happen and the bead can sit too low. This isn't the end of the world, the bike will still ride fine, but it does look a little crap. There's two ways to try and fix this. Firstly, let the air out and try and manipulate the tyre into giving you what you want. Or do the opposite. Just dump lots of air and try and pop the beads into place like you would with a tubeless tyre. This is terrifying though, as it feels like the tube could just burst out the rim tape or the tyre could just come off. I honestly hate pumping these types of wheel up high. But in this case, 60 psi did get the bead mostly in the right place without exploding. Way! With all that exciting tyre chat done, I can finally fit the wheel. Because the frame's got horizontal dropouts, I'll use these small BMX style tugs to tension the chain. And you know what? Cutting the knobs was probably a good idea. The clearance isn't as big as I thought. Hopefully with the wheel pulled back and centered, it will not rub the knobs. But I can't do that without a chain, so here's one the cute thief made earlier. And what do you know? It's already the perfect length. He's such a smart cat. And not a single knob rubbed. Perfect. It really is a good job speed isn't important. The drag from this freewheel is crazy, but I guess that's why it's one of the more reliable ones on the market. With the rear wheel fitted, we're nearly done. I guess it really is time for the headset next. And here it is. No cups needed as the bearings drop directly into the frame. So boring though. Slightly less boring now. I like to use well-balanced forks on my bike, and this one is now well and truly balanced. The cute thief did well again. This is a fairly rare Trialtech SL model. I really think they should make an updated tapered version of these as they're light and strong. The dream combo. But as you can see, there's no disc mounts. I told you 26-inch bikes love rim brakes. Like the frame, this has dedicated Magura 4-bolt mounts. Another trial product, and this is one hell of a stem. With 50mm stems now considered long on mountain bikes, this 150mm one is sure to melt some brains. It has a 30-degree angle to give lots of height to make up for the extra high bottom bracket the frame has. And it has a sloping top cap area to reduce knee impacts and allow a shorter, lighter steerer. But the quirkiness doesn't stop there. There's no faceplates or even any bolt holes up by the bar clamp. How does this even work? Hopefully it makes sense now. I've never seen a bar clamp like this before. I'm not sure if it has any real benefits, perhaps it's just cheaper to make. It certainly stands out though, and that's probably a good enough reason. Now because this is a sloping stem design, it needs a special top cap to match. A normal one simply wouldn't work. Carbon always seems to have good resonance, and now everyone in Scotland knows I'm building a bike. This is a trial-specific bar from French brand Crukers. They may not be great with names, but they do make decent products, and this is light, strong, and has attractive figures. Trials bars tend not to have much back sweep, probably due to most comp riders running them so far forwards, angles start to go backwards. I'm not sure how extreme I want my angle yet. Far forwards is what the best guys run, but I'm not one of those guys, so perhaps I should rake them further back, more like a newbie. Fitting the bar is a little trickier with this stem. The clamps are like my jeans since I gained weight. A tight fit and take some persuading to get on. I probably should have greased things. No, that's not a joke at innuendo. I actually should have. I have thought an advantage of this stem design though. By not having any bolts on the very top, it won't hurt your chest as much if you hit it. And that's a very real thing, by the way. I've certainly done it in the past, and it's not pleasant. Also, 2 bolts are lighter than 4, plus you can also remove the bar without removing your lever and grip, like you would have to for a similar design, but without the separate clamps, like the old Monty stems. With the cockpit fitted, we're nearly done. Just need to do the front wheel next. This is another pre-loved one which saves me a ton of time. It's similar to the rear with the huge holes and single wall design, but it's narrower to save more weight, as comp trials bikes spend a lot of time on the rear wheel and a lighter front wheel is just less tiring. There's more Trialtech goodness with the hub. Being a non-disc model, this is pretty much as simple as it gets and is very light. I then made a narrower matching rim tape as the rear one seems to have worked great. As for the front tyre, I'm using another trial product. This is their front trial-specific tyre. Now, they stopped making these nearly 15 years ago, but it was always my favourite choice. It's a little on the heavy side, but it's got quite a damped feel. I really loved how this tyre felt so composed. It never rebounded wildly, and it would just stay where you put it. More careful fitting needed though. Front wheels can often be worse than rears due to being narrower. The other issue with single-walled rims is that the valve can decide to go at wild angles. I'll leave this for future Ali to worry about. Future Ali can also worry about the bead not popping into place fully. Like I said, it won't affect the bike, so it doesn't need to be fixed. It's just an aesthetic thing. With the front wheel fitted, the bike is nearly done. I just need to add the brakes next, and Trialtech once again treated me to some of their new products. These are their Sport HP hydraulic levers. These are designed to work with Magura's HS33 rim brake calipers and are an upgrade from the plasticky Magura levers. They also have slightly smaller pistons for increased power, high quality bushings to stop blade slop, specialist piston material that doesn't soak up water like other brands can over a long time period, optimal hose angle, smart bleed port position, plus many more details. But let's be honest, they match the frame and that's what really counts. The only real issue I have is that the calipers don't match and are pretty tatty in general. The Cute Thief slacks with these. I'm not scared to strip though. These calipers are in for a hell of a time. Oh yeah, quick reminder, if you're going to be working with strippers, always wear protection. Now, while they're having fun, let's deal with the rear brake. The rear calipers are also black, but I'm going to keep them this way. Silver calipers on black forks, black calipers on silver frame will look pretty cool, I think. Rather than bleed them with Magura oil, I'm using Trialtech's own. This is much closer to the viscosity of water and moves much quicker through the system, making for a brake that's easier to pull. I don't know a single comp rider that still uses Magura oil. In fact, most riders just use water. Heat buildup isn't an issue and water feels nice and is cheap. The only issues are that some pistons can soak up water and swell over time, but not these levers. And in winter, water can and will freeze, pushing your pads out and locking the brake. I've had this happen a few times and yeah, it's very annoying. Pads will be my own material. I actually have a video on how to make your own trials pads, which I've fitted to some TNN alloy backings. Alloy backings are stiffer than plastic, and Tati Bikes are the new owner and distributor of TNN products, so go check them out if you want some new ones. There's no hose guides on this frame, so I'm going to try and find a decent route, and then I have some stick-on guides I'll add later. But first, dedicated frame mounts mean dedicated brake clamps. These are racing line models, and they're pretty much as simple as you can get and clamp directly to the calipers rather than a plastic washer like Magura clamps do. Normally, the plastic washer sits into the clamps a little bit like a ball joint, allowing you to angle the calipers to make sure the pads hit flat. They can be a little fiddly to set up though, and some might say they can flex a little. With these clamps clamping directly onto the calipers, it's stiffer and easier to set up. The downside is that they aren't as adjustable. And if your frame mounts aren't flat and level, your pads won't hit flat and level. And the only thing you can do is have crappy brakes until the pads have worn to the rim. I mentioned earlier that trials riders grind their rims. I wasn't being rude. We really do take an angle grinder and add a rough texture to the braking surface. Combined with harder pads, it creates a lot of friction, even in the wet, and gives the brakes a lot of bite. The downside is that they are very, very loud. There's no way you'd want to do this on a normal bike. With that all fitted, these are the stick-on hose guides I mentioned. I think the Cute Thief just got them from Amazon. Right, well, back to the front calipers. I wonder how they're getting on. Well, it looks like the clothes have come off, exactly as planned. Continuing with this cheeky theme, these front clamps can't stay orange, but with them being anodized rather than painted, I need to get some different entertainment. Caustic soda, sodium hydroxide, lye, whatever you want to call it, this is some sexy stuff. But it's also got a dark side. This stuff is into some nasty things, so really don't scrimp on the protection here. When you combine sodium hydroxide and hot water, you get a powerful solution that dissolves organic matter, which is why it's sold as a drain cleaner. The other thing it dissolves is aluminium, which is why it also works really well as a stripper. The hotter the water, the stronger the reaction. But a few words of warnings. This will completely dissolve aluminium components if left in too long. It also creates hydrogen gas, which isn't toxic, but it will displace oxygen, and suffocation is a real risk. Only do this in a well-ventilated area. Oh, and obviously it goes without saying, don't get this on your skin, in your eyes, or up any of your face holes either. I wanted a second dip, and I made my life a little bit easier by grouping them on a zip tie. No more digging around for them this time. While the solution is fresh, I'm going to give you a pedal spoiler, as I want to strip these cages too. Anodizing is usually only a few microns deep, so you don't need to leave them in for too long. They might come out a little dark, but after some buffing, they should be nice and silver. These clamps do use the plastic washers, but were still pretty easy to set up. With the front brake fitted, we're nearly done. Just the pedals needed next. I wonder what they could be. Oh, what a surprise. These are Echo cage pedals. Don't ask me why comp riders love cage pedals so much. Why do comp riders love cage pedals so much, Ali? Well, if you must know, it's because they're really, really weird people.
God, you're weird, aren't you? I mean, you're really weird.
Okay, I kid. I'm weird too. It's the weight. These pedals with the titanium axle weigh less than a gnat's fart. Maybe there's some other advantages I'm missing out, but there's no design. These are lighter than platforms. With the pedals done, we're almost finished. Just the grips to go next. CT got me these Donny McCuskell grips, but they spelt his name wrong. These are nice and thin, which is ideal for comp trials, plus a lot easier to fit and remove than bar tape, like most other comp folks seem to love. One last detail, this hose will rub the frame, so I'll add a sneaky sticker as protection. Right, with that sticker fitted, we're done. Just need to make sure things are straight and tight, and then see how heavy this thing is. Place your bets. Actually, first, I need to add one thing. I bounced the bike and noticed the chain was hitting the chainstay. Because of its design, the chain is a hair's width away, and no matter how tight it is, it'll hit it and make noises. So I'm going to add a selection of furry-sided Velcro, which I hope will make it quieter and protect the frame. It rubs, but I'd rather this than the bike sounding like a bag of spanners. Who guessed 9.5 kilos? Well done indeed. Now this is quite heavy for a comp bike, but it's still a little lighter than my Hex. I could definitely save a decent chunk with lighter tyres and maybe some titanium bolts though. Okay, one last thing. I had a sticky piston on the front brake. Despite the work needed to strip the calipers, I can't be bothered trying to free it up, so I just stuck on a silver set the cute thief brought me just moments ago. It's almost like he planned it. Perhaps I'm not giving him enough treats. Phew, finally done, and it looks so cool. I know Ross McCarthy will be foaming at the mouth when he sees it. But I just want to see how it rides. I think it's dried up a bit now, so let's go outside. My back is still a little sore, so just a short one today. This bike has a plus 70 BB, which is not unusual these days, but it's definitely higher than I'd ever choose. But I have to admit, the back wheel control of this thing is insane. However, two things that aren't insane are the brakes. The rims have old grinds, and I probably got some gunk from the tyres onto them too. Fresh grinds are needed ASAP, which should sort them out nicely. The other thing I'm not so sure about is the stem. I went high because of the high BB, but I think it could be shorter and lower. I might experiment and also try different stems. CT came out to see how I was getting on. I love how chill he is. He seems to enjoy watching me ride the bikes he brings. Despite it being a little heavy for a modern comp bike, I'm not noticing the weight at all. It actually rides very light. So, what do you think? Like I said, this is almost the polar opposite to the last build I did. I have previously stated, on many occasions, that I don't get on well with more extreme geometry of modern comp bikes, mainly the extra high bottom bracket height. I find it puts my centre of gravity too high, plus I find it hard to adapt to where the rear wheel is in relation to where my feet are. But I'm just used to the older bikes I grew up with. I'll try my best to ride this as good as I can though. Maybe I'll finally come around to high BBs. Now, there's only one thing I have to mention, and that's where this frame actually came from. CT made a great contact in America and chatted to Aaron Lutz. He has his own channel, Super Rider, which you should definitely check out. I even wore his merch while riding before. He's making some great content and was extremely generous to let this frame come to my channel rather than use it himself. Thanks, Aaron. Theron. Even though it's not the style of bike I normally ride, I really do like this frame. My first ever proper bike was a GT, and it even had the same finish as this. I should probably do a video with them both. I think the polished and black looks really classy too, and the parts CT chose all feel solid and should be nice and reliable. And I know I've mentioned the BB height already, but look how much higher it is than the hub axles. It feels like you need a step ladder to get on this thing. I can't wait to try this on some rocks though. That's where these tyres should come alive. I'm hoping it'll give me a fighting chance of controlling such extreme geometry. But like I mentioned, I need to play with stem lengths and height. I might have something else on for my first riding video. I'll see how I get on with the hydraulic brakes too. I'm hoping the Trialtech levers will give me more power than I'm used to with a Magura lever, but I'm unsure if they'll beat my favourite brakes, V-brakes. But we'll see soon. But yeah, as far as cool, unique and rare builds go, this gets an A+. But what does the master think? Not only do I have CT and Aaron to thank, but also Trialtech for supplying the crank parts and levers. I'm really hoping they can increase their range, as it simply is the best quality comp stuff out there. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this bike. I'll ride it as soon as my body lets me, but until then, thanks for joining me, have an amazing week, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.